The Baltimore Ravens have their final preseason game of 2023 coming up, and we talk about a final positional battle review and so much more coming up next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in here to another edition of Locked On Ravens. We're your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, and I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here and always making Locked On Ravens your first listen. Each and every day, we're free and available all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store and sign up with promo code Locked On to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. And we are back. It is the final Purple Friday of the preseason. We have regular season football coming up. It's super exciting, but the final 53 is not finalized yet. And here to talk about a final positional battle push is former Baltimore Ravens wide receiver and Super Bowl champion. It's Qadry Ismail in the house once again. And Q, I'm excited for preseason to end because I think the regular season just has so much more allure to it. But for some of these young guys who are fighting for roster spots, fighting for playing time, this last game, it means everything to them.
Yeah, I mean, it sure does. I think, you look at the way you've made your mark in college to whatever the level you played at and got an opportunity to show off for the scouts. Scouts thought you were good enough to get on a roster. Go ahead, get on a roster, and then you get an invite to training camp. Now you're in training camp. Get these preseason games. You're playing with that jersey on of, in this particular case, the Baltimore Ravens, and you're trying to just impress. You're trying to impress not only the Ravens, you're trying to impress other teams. You're trying to put yourself in a position where you can make a 53-man roster. I mean, that's what it's all about, and you're chasing that dream. You're chasing the dream of being one of the elite football players, the less than 1%. Try to make a career out of it before you got to continue on down your road of adulting in life.
And it's so interesting because it's not only, as you talked about, just, final 53-man spot this year. These guys maybe are playing for practice squad positions, playing for other roster spots on other teams. This is tape that not just the Ravens can use, but every NFL team can use over the course of their entire football career, however long it does last. But there are a couple battles that I think we've gotten a little bit of clarity on, Q, and then some that I still think need some hashing out between some guys. I think one that I'm really interested in is the fourth running back position, because I know we've talked about it where Justice Hill's firmly on the roster. He's running back 3. There's no conversation about his roster spot. They signed him to an extension, and to me, that's what it is. But between Melvin Gordon and Keaton Mitchell, those are the two guys who I think are fighting for that fourth running back spot. Keaton Mitchell's a guy that has shown a lot of bursts in the preseason, getting outside and taking the ball for very long gains, had that touchdown that was called back in week 1. But Melvin Gordon's the steady veteran, and the Ravens like their steady veterans in a room with J.K. and Gus Edwards and Justice Hill. He will be kind of the mentor in that room. So I think there's a better shot of Melvin Gordon making the practice squad than Keaton Mitchell, because I think Keaton Mitchell gets scooped up. But who do you think has the edge right now between those two guys?
Honestly, I know Melvin Gordon has a lot of experience and feeling really good. But when you got J.K. coming back, I mean, J.K. is experienced enough. What veteran understanding are you going to tell me? I know when you look at the bigger picture of the room, like, I'd rather go for Keith Mitchell and know that, he's a guy that you can develop and put into a situation where he's only going to get better. You don't know really what's going to happen with J.K. the next year. So if, in fact, that something comes about and you got to rely upon a Gus Edwards to be the bell cow, where you're going to have another guy in Keith Mitchell that's kind of like that yin and yang type of a running back. His style is completely different than Gus the Bus. So I think the bigger picture is, like, Gus has played, in his 6 seasons too. So that's a lot. That's a lot to play in the National Football League, especially as a running back. So if it was a totally young room, sure, you got your veteran, but it's not. And so since it's not, I'm not necessarily all that like, oh, we definitely need to have a veteran. And I like Melvin Gordon. I think he's done a fine job, phenomenal job. Maybe you do put him in a scenario where you're like, hey, we're going to either keep you on the practice squad or you stay ready and we'll see what happens. Who knows? I think that might be the case where you roll the dice. But I think it's a good way to roll the dice, and I don't believe the Ravens are going to be coming up snake eyes because, like you said, Justice Hill, he's looking really, really good also. And you got to also think this, too. Last final point on this, special teams. When guys go down, you're going to have a guy that comes in for special teams, and I'm not so sure you're going to have Melvin Gordon being a special teams guy, whereas Keith Mitchell, get your butt in there and go down there and cover that kick.
We saw it. We saw Keaton Mitchell play gunner in the game against Washington. We saw him as a kick returner. He got hurt on that kick return, and hopefully it's just a shoulder stinger. So the Ravens got out pretty unscathed there, and so did Keaton Mitchell. But your point there, Q, kind of reminds me of Lamar during his younger years, where they obviously had Joe Flacco for him and Robert Griffin III for him, and there was kind of a conversation of, all right, when does Lamar graduate from having the backup veteran mentor, because he had too much experience to have one. And obviously we've seen Tyler Huntley being Lamar's primary backup over the past couple of seasons. I think you're right that with JK, with Gus, those guys don't need a 10-year vet to tell them what to do. They have enough experience on their own. I wouldn't say it would be a bad thing, but that's why I think Gordon on the practice squad, I think gives you the same of what you'd get from him outside of the active roster. And then Keaton Mitchell, you put him on there, he gives you that different skill set like you talk about. And I totally agree with that. But another key battle, Q, is that 6 wide receiver spot. We talked about it after the Ravens' first preseason game. And we talked about James Prochet in the not so wonderful game he had against the Philadelphia Eagles. And unfortunately, he was on the wrong end. I feel bad for him, honestly, Q. It just feels like all these plays that happen. The ball from Josh Johnson in the Washington game, it was underthrown. Yeah. I think we can admit that. But the ball goes through Prochet's hands, it looks like, into the arms of the Washington defensive back. Tylan Wallace scores another touchdown. To me, it feels like, as we talk about the special teams experience, if you want to make this roster, part of the way you can do it is through special teams. We know Tylan can do that. It feels like Tylan's all but locked up this job, and James Prochet, Laquan Treadwell, all those other guys are probably on the outside looking in.
Absolutely. When you get your opportunity, you make the most of it, regardless of what the opportunity is. And unless you have a signing bonus that, the organization has to save face and keep you, basically everyone is on the chopping block. And so that bottom half of the roster, James Prochet has been fighting tooth and nail to stay out of the proverbial doghouse. And unfortunately, when it came to the games and his experience and some of the things he should be doing, it didn't happen for him. I mean, those are some big mistakes, a fumble punt. And then, of course, a play that he's made before. That's the thing. Like, we've seen him make the tough catch. We've seen him, make the acrobatic move and be the hero. And so, 2 turnovers, that's not winning football. So I don't know what's going on behind the lines, but I do know this, that Tylan Wallace has played extremely well. I know, special teams is really important when you're that lower level receiver, running back, linebacker, that fifth corner, all those positions. Heck, I mean, the offensive lineman, that's a swing, offensive lineman can play tackle, guard, whatever. When he's active, he might very well be in there on special teams. So again, it's the more you can do, you only have so many roster spots. And that's where I think Tylan Wallace, he earned to be in that conversation of who he is.
Yep, 100% with you there. And speaking about you don't have enough roster, well, I don't think any team has enough roster spots for guys they want to keep, but you only have so many. And I think that applies to the Ravens tight end position, Q, because we saw Mr. Travis Vokalek step up, and he stepped up all training camp. He stepped up, and I know if you're watching the video for him, you see Q rolling his eyes a little bit, and that's because Q is one of the you might be one of the, if not the biggest Charlie Kohler guy, and of course the biggest guy that we've had Charlie Kohler wise on this show. That's Q's guy. Devonta Freeman's my guy. Charlie Kohler is Q's guy. Now, Charlie Kohler, Q led the Ravens in receiving yards. He had 2 really long catches, looked good, but Travis Vokolek had 2 touchdowns. Now, my prediction is that the Ravens end up keeping 3. It's likely Andrews and Kohler, obviously Andrews first. But my thing was, Vokolek, you can put him on the practice squad. You can kind of sneak him on there. But with this game and with the training camp he had 2 touchdowns. Maybe another team tries to swoop him up off of waivers if Baltimore goes that way. So how do you think this tight end position shakes out, particularly with Vokolek?
Yeah, with Vokolek, I mean, all the training camp practices that I attended, he showed up. So they ain't no hate coming over from here. Not going to hear that. We ain't getting it twisted. Don't need the tweets and all the other things. Dude can play. And when you see him up close and personal, you're like, that looks like a tight end. He clearly isn't making any MAs or mental errors. He's putting himself in position to make catches with the opportunities that he's getting. Is he with the third group? Yep. But is he making the most of it? Yep. Just like I said with Tyler Wallace. For Kolar, he's actually putting himself in position to make plays too. It's interesting because when he's with the second group, there's like a different dynamic, if you will. Like the first couple of portions of the training camp practices, I think it was Todd Monken trying to establish like his intermediate to short game, his quick game. And so the tight ends had some love. But Isaiah Likely was out there and he was doing Isaiah Likely type things. And so then you had, obviously, tight end 1 and Mark Andrews doing tight end things with Mark and obviously Lamar. So it was kind of like, yeah, you could see where, he was kind of getting lost in it all. But Isaiah went down, and that's where I saw a guy really just come up and step up. And Charlie, he looked the part. So, again, why are we, even having this debate? Just put him on the team. He's done. It's over. It's okay. Get your Charlie Kohler jersey, and then everything's going to be okay.
I wonder how many Charlie Kohler jerseys we'll see. I know you'll be in yours, Q, so that's at least one. But
rocking out the 8-8.
Yeah, we'll see with Vokolek, though, in that 4-7. I don't know. I'm intrigued to see what Baltimore does with him because they're in kind of a bind with their corner situation because they can't put Marlon and Pepe Williams on IR right now. That would end their season. They have to keep him on the final 53 until cutdown day is over. So coming up in the second part of the show, we'll talk about some defensive position battles. Also get into the left guard competition, Jadeveon Clowney. A juicy second segment coming up here on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode is brought to you by Harry's. And there are plenty of reasons why someone could shave, whether it's for yourself, your partner, your kids. And a great shave can make you feel really good. It can make you feel confident, attractive, clean, young. And no matter why you shave, Harry's has you covered for the best shave of your life at a price you'll love from the legendary high-quality ranges of skin products like exfoliating face wash and hydration lotion. Harry's gives you a premium shave without the premium price tag. Get better quality and a better price than other razors when you get Harry's delivered right to your door. And the Harry set, it makes your shaving experience better. Take it from me. The razors are super sleek and the packaging is really great too. And for me, sometimes I have a little facial hair, but for the most part, I clean shave. And Harry's, it helped me get the clean shave down. A smooth shave shouldn't be rough on your wallet. The starter set is a $13 value for just $3 at harrys.com/NFL. It includes a 5-blade German engineered razor, weight handle, foaming shave gel, and a travel cover. Schedule delivery for refills as low as $2, half of what you pay for other blades. Harry's makes the skincare products that will give you the best shave ever. Creams, washes, lotions that will keep your skin healthy and hydrated. Blades made in their own factory in Germany that stay sharp. Guys who've tried it say their 8th shave is as sharp as their first. They have sleek, weighted handles that look great in your bathroom and give you precise control with each swipe. There's no reason not to try Harry's. Harry's has the highest customer satisfaction in the shaving industry, and they're still offering a no-risk trial. Don't like your shave? No worries. It's on them. Get your best shave ever this summer with Harry's razors and skincare products. Get a $13 starter set for just $3 at harrys.com/NFL. That's harrys.com/NFL for the $3 starter set. We're back. Our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Alshucker still here with Qadry Ismail. And Q, let's finish out offensive final positional battles. I think the last one we have to get into is left guard. It's been the only question on the starting offensive line for the Ravens with 4 or 5 starters returning. John Simpson seems to have overtaken Saleh. It seems like it's been a battle between those two for most of training camp. Simpson has been one of PFF's highest graded linemen throughout the entirety of the preseason. He's shown that he's physical, has a very high, he has the smarts. I think he understands the game, understands where he needs to be. I think that Saleh's just not totally ready yet. He has the tools, the traits, the athleticism, but coming out of college, the thing was, well, he just needs a year or two. And I think we've seen that over the course of the preseason. I think Simpson is much more ready. And that, to me, I think is where Baltimore needs to go. And that's who they need to start in week 1 based off of what they're going for this season, which is Super Bowl contention.
So I think, going into camp, it's a credit to the offensive linemen and the competitiveness, coaching, scheme, that you had such a good competitive kind of feel of who's who in the zoo. And so for John, I credit him for, coming out and playing consistent and being that guy that's in that conversation. For Saleh, like the fact that you see him just like, all right, give me the opportunity and I'll make the most of it. I think that speaks volumes, how he leapfrogged some guys that were already there in the Clevelands and the Fa'aleles of the world. This is all, the bottom line is, this is all a really good problem to have. What was the issue before? Depth at the offensive line. One guy goes down, you're kind of like, boy. But now you're like, what in the Kelechi Osemele meets Ben Grubbs is going on here? We got ourselves an opportunity to have some good quality depth, and that's a good thing.
It definitely is, and I think it speaks to the Ravens where there will probably be 1 or 2 guys. I think they would ideally maybe like to keep 9 or 10 offensive linemen. I don't know if they can go that far at cut down day because we're going to talk about it. It's Q's favorite conversation, the cornerback room. We've talked about it probably every week for the last, 2 months or 3 months. We've been talking about it, and Q thinks we jinxed it because we were talking about it so much, and then Marlon goes down. But as I was saying, it's interesting because
Devontae Freeman him.
Yeah. Oh, but you can't put Marlon and Pepe on the IR list right now, as I mentioned, because it would end their season. You have to put them on after the fact. So Baltimore has to have those two, because ideally you'd put Pepe on because he's not going to come back, what is reported, until about October, and then you have an extra roster spot to work with. So you can talk on the defense about, Malik Ham making the roster as an outside linebacker. What's that position going to look like, or the inside linebacker battle. But to me, I think corner is the glaring, conversation to have, because there are players like Ardarius Washington, Kevon Seymour, who are vying for roster spots. What's the status of Daryl Worley going to be? Where are they going to play Brandon Stevens? There are a lot of players. And so if you're going, Q, with the assumption that they're going to keep Marlon, Rock Ya-Sin, Ronald Darby, Jalen Armour-Davis, Pepe Williams, and Caillou Kelly on their roster, that's already 6 guys. I assume they're going to keep at least 7. And I'm kind of thinking, well, where are you going to shuffle around the roster? Those 6 plus Ardarius Washington, who I think has played incredible football over the course of the couple preseason games and training camp too. The team really likes Kevon Seymour. That's 8 guys. What I could see, if there's a max, I think, of 8 guys they can keep there. And then I think what will happen, in just my prediction, Q, I want to know if you agree, is that they'll do some handshake deal with Daryl Worley. It seems like they really like him. And what would happen is they'll say, hey, you know what? We're going to bring you back, Daryl. You just give us a day to get the whole IR situation situated. And so they put Pepe on IR and they bring back Daryl Worley. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. So this is the jockeying for positioning of your roster versus the other teams in the National Football League jockeying for their rosters. Everybody already has their 22 guys. Everybody is like next level. I mean, you'll see some trades. We saw some trades happening earlier in the week with the quarterback play from Arizona to, I think it was Cleveland, was it? I believe.
Yeah, Cleveland, yeah.
Right? Okay. So with all that, you got to look at it from your defense standpoint, that there's some other teams out there that their defense is going to be in a kind of a tough bind. And what does that look like for them? And can they quote unquote roster raid, as I like to call it, where you're just raiding another team's roster. Hey, but usually veterans, and again, part of it is if they're on a regular season roster and you're a vested veteran, I mean, your contract's guaranteed. So even if you're quote unquote released, you got guaranteed money. But if you're not on a opening week roster, then not guaranteed. And so they can kind of jockey back and forth. So yes, you do have that jockeying for position. And it is interesting to see who's going to be there. And I could see, as to your point, Worley being that guy.
And he was that guy for them last year. You remember, Q, where he was getting added to the practice squad, then called up to the active roster, then released, and added to the practice squad. It happened like 8 or 9 times over the course of the season. And I think he was one of the most transactionally – he had the most transactions to his name over the course of the entire season, which was crazy. But and I kind of do this in terms of like percentages of who could get claimed on waivers. I don't think any team's going to go out there and say, we're going to use our waiver claim on Daryl Worley. Maybe they do. I'd be shocked if it happened, though, and that's where I think the Ravens could bring him back. For Kevon Seymour, I think there's a little chance, but not a lot. I think the Ravens like him. Maybe they add him to their roster just to keep him on there 100%, but I wouldn't think there's a massive shot of him getting claimed. Ardarius Washington, I think, would probably get claimed on waivers. I think he's showed out. He's a young guy, has that slot corner safety. Q, I think if the season started today, Ardarius should be their starting slot corner. I
could see that. I mean, totally. Like he's earned the right to be in that conversation. Like he's confident, doesn't make many mistakes, and again, from John Harbaugh in his presser, when they were asking about him, he was saying that, man, I like his athleticism and his ability to pinpoint that ball up in the air and go up and snatch it. I think those are some great traits that you're looking for a guy like, hey, he has a flair for the dramatic, and let him cook, let him eat, let him do his thing. So we'll see how it all shakes out, but it looks favorable for Washington.
Yeah, I think he will be the 7, because a lot of these guys have corner safety versatility, like guys, Washington and Stevens and Worley's playing safety now. Everybody has that versatility, and I think for the Ravens, they need as many of those guys as they can get, especially with the injuries they've gone through already at corner. They get a couple of guys back in practice, Rocky St. Arthur Millette both returning, so that was a positive sign. But I mentioned Malik Ham earlier, Q, and I kind of thought maybe this guy could be a dark horse to make the roster until the Ravens signed Jadeveon Clowney. I think Clowney slots into that spot. You have 5 outside linebackers or pass rushers at that position, and Owe, Ajabo, Clowney. You have Bowser, who's on the NFI list, and that could be key in terms of maybe keeping an extra guy. And then Tavius Robinson. We didn't get the chance to talk about it, though, Q. Clowney signs with Baltimore, 1-year deal, up to $6 million, but $2.5 million guaranteed. He's someone that, again, we know the edge-setting ability, the run defense, it's phenomenal. Pass rushing and getting sacks is a little more inconsistent, but I think it was a move Baltimore needed to make, and he was one of the best free agents left on the market, whether you think his skill set fits or not. But I do think it fits what they need, because it takes pressure off of Odafe Oweh, takes pressure off of David Ajabo, and just adds another solid option to that group.
So one of the things that I was appreciative of was his interviews that he's had. And so I heard from just multiple sources that he's kind of a tough guy to deal with, and some of the things that he said. But what I appreciated was the way he was talking about the culture and the locker room fit. And it was a good one for him. And he also gave praise to John Harbaugh. So in my mind, the way in which he, presented all that, like I was like, all right, cool. It seems like, he's not going to be disgruntled or, a hard guy to deal with. But in fact, he's like, look, my goal is to play 17 weeks. That's what I want to do. I want to play 17 weeks. I don't think he's played an entire season in his entire career. Talked about how he played, it was second game or first game or something. He wound up hurting himself at the Texans, and it was just downhill from there. He has history with his both the Coach Smith and drawing a blank on his name, his D-line coach.
Anthony Weaver.
Thank you. Anthony Weaver. He has history with them. Obviously, Weave was down there in Houston with him. So there's a good, flow that I think is going to be helpful for him to be able to be successful. And again, I think if he can, in fact, play 17 games, let him be a disruptor. Let him be a guy that can go out there. It seems like he's really motivated to kind of re-energize and recharge his career.
It feels like Baltimore's had success with some of those guys, Q, that are, I don't even know how to label it, have I guess, tough to deal with, as you said, those tough to deal with characteristics. We heard that a lot about Marcus Peters and how, he was tough to deal with in Kansas City. Now, his teammates in LA loved him on the Rams, but a guy like Steve Smith, he had the tough characteristics. And, the Ravens seem to be a place where guys just come in and they fit in and they want to be a part of the organization. So I think it'll work out. There are the concerns about the leadership, about the injuries, as you talked about. He's only played a full 17 or a full season, I think once, and it was maybe 7 years ago. So he hasn't had a ton of health success. And then also the sack numbers, he's had 9.5 sacks, 9 sacks, but has never had a 10-sack season, and has had seasons of no sacks, 2 sacks, 4.5. So there is consistency, but the one area I think he will bring that is in the run game. I think it's going to be tough for the Ravens to have a bad run defense this year. I think they're going to have a good one. It's going to be hard for them to, I think, fall off from where they were. Obviously, you lose Calais Campbell. That's a pretty big blow. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. But I think Clowney can come in and be physical. Now, he did look leaner in the pictures than I think we saw him over the course.
He did.
It seemed like he lost some weight and it got lost a little bit of it. But hopefully the physicality will translate over to the season this year for the Ravens. But coming up in the final part of the show, we'll talk about preseason thoughts. We'll get Q's thoughts on the Washington Super Bowl preseason game that had plenty of intensity. The streak is over. We'll also talk about their upcoming matchup with Tampa Bay a little bit, so be sure to stay tuned. Lots to dive into on the show. But first, this episode is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. And August is here, and you know what that means. The official start of fantasy football drafting month. Get championship ready for your home league by trying out Best Ball on Underdog Fantasy. All you do is one live snake draft, no waivers, no trades. Underdog sets your best lineup every week. Try it out with Underdog's Best Ball Mania tournament. Largest fantasy football contest of all time is back and even bigger, with $50 million of total prizes up for grabs, including an absurd $3 million going to the winner. Last year, the winner drafted their team in July, so don't wait around. Visit UnderdogFantasy.com or find them in the App Store and sign up with promo code LOCKEDON to get your first deposit doubled up to $100. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code LOCKEDON. We're back rounding out Locked On Ravens. Kevin Olshaker still here with Qadry Ismail. And this is our first show where the Ravens have not had a preseason winning streak together. They've had that streak since 2015. It ends on Monday night. What do you want to call it? A devastating. No, it did not matter. They lost the game. The streak is over. The Commanders, though, they had a lot of, I'll call it, intensity for that game. And there are a couple of ways I want to frame this, Q, because I think there have been a couple of ways it has been framed that are unfair. I think the Commanders put a lot of energy into that game. I think they wanted to win it. I think they put a lot of effort into it. Yeah, just a little bit, because they played their offensive starters into halftime. They played with an intensity. They celebrated. But the thing with the celebration is that for these young guys who are out there, it means a lot to them. Like, I'm not going to try to take that away and say, oh, these guys shouldn't celebrate. Now, it was a little crazy out there. I'm not going to lie, but this could be some of those guys' last games. It could be one of the last moments they have in their NFL career. Now, the way that the Commanders approached the game, the way that guys like Sam Cosmi were talking about it, Jahan Dotson after the game, those are guys who are going to play with the Commanders for a while. So it's not like that was their last game. We saw the fight between Nick Gates on that cheap shot through Ardarius Washington, Sam Cosmi doing the little gritty dance in the end zone. Seemed like the Commanders had some juice there and really wanted to win this game to end the streak. And it is just a preseason game, but with the celebration aspect, I do want to acknowledge that for some of those young guys who are fighting for roster spots, and especially maybe undrafted rookies, guys getting their first taste of NFL action, I'm sure it didn't mean a lot to them. But man, Q, that felt like a Super Bowl, didn't it?
I tell you what, like, it was so weird when I'm listening to the broadcast, and Troy Aikman is like, "Wow, this is the greatest preseason game that I've ever been a part of," and it was, I guess, his first and only one. But with that said, yeah, usually preseason games are boring, and they're from a once the starters go out, everything is kind of downhill. Well, you didn't really have any starters for the Ravens. The Ravens did what Ravens did and have done since John Harbaugh in 2015, which is, we're going to play our starters, get them out. Then we're going to have some backups, and we're going to have guys that are going to be good enough to play. and let them compete into the final quarter, and let's see how it is. I thought the way Washington played at their joint practices, the chippiness of the Ravens got the better of them. You go into the final preseason, or not final preseason, but the preseason game, and I think the Commanders were like, yo, they punked us. We got to get them back. And, oh, by the way, we're about to take that streak from them too. So it kind of took a life of its own because of what happened with the back and forth smack talk and obviously fights that took place, or skirmishes, however you want to word it, at the castle. So again, like, it was good football, it was awesome football, but it's a preseason game, and last I checked, like, even the new owner, he was getting caught up in it, and I'm like, bro, like, yeah, okay, watch what happens when your team is 5-11, and now all of a sudden the fan base ain't so happy, and you sitting there like, I got to renew my suites for my field so I can get that that extra money. Like, everything takes on a whole different level during the regular season. So enjoy it. It was great. It was cool. What the Ravens did was remarkable because there were so many different guys that you don't even know. Because of the fact that they're not on the normal regular day roster. So kudos to the legacy of the game. Sort of kind of kudos to the Commanders, I guess, for winning. And then I guess when you look at it for the Ravens perspective, all right, here comes Tampa. Let's start another streak.
Now, what's a fact, Q, is that Greg Roman never lost a preseason game as a coach of the. I'm kidding. I am kidding, everyone, please. But, there were so many guys who were a part of that streak. And I mean, look, the Ravens got, from a winning-losing perspective, it does not mean anything. Just because the Ravens are 1-1 in the preseason does not mean that that loss is going to come with them to the regular season. The win-loss aspect means nothing. I think the Ravens gained as much as they could from losing as they would have with winning. It's the same different type of thing. But one really interesting thing that I noticed, Q, was that final defensive possession for the Ravens. It was all-out blitz after all-out blitz. It seemed like Don Martindale snuck into the stadium and took over play calling from Mike McDonald. My hot take is that I don't think Baltimore was playing to win. I think they were experimenting. I will not go as far as to say they were playing to lose. I don't think they were doing that. But I think they were experimenting with their guys and saying, well, can we do this or that in a certain situation schematically? And yes, it's not there. You don't have Roquan and Patrick Queen and Marlon and all those guys out there. But I think they were experimenting instead of running a full 2-minute defense, because in a regular season game, Q, in a 2-minute drill where, you're playing for the game, you're not all out blitzing every single play, are you?
No. And even, to Wink Martindale reference, I remember they played against, Cleveland, and it was Baker Mayfield, and Baker was, having his way, and, they needed to make a play, and they played, a zone scheme where they blitz guys and drop guys out and confused him a little bit, but then finally did like an all-out blitz, and I think it was C.J. Mosley dropped back and, got into the passing lane. This ain't that. This is like, hey, who do I got? If I do play man-to-man, let's see what's going on. Again, I'm not trying to have extra plays. I ain't trying to make this a long game. Let's just get it over with. If you guys are good and you're going to do it good. But if you're not, then we got you and the streak continues. It's just an evaluation. It's evaluation of what you think you can do.
Yep, I'm with you on that. And I know when the Ravens head to Tampa to play the Buccaneers on Saturday, it's going to be more the evaluation. But I think the coaches, the players, they hold a special place, at least the guys who were fighting for roster spots, they hold the last preseason game with a special place in their heart. I always go back to, what was it, 2015? Maybe Michael Pierce. Michael Pierce essentially made the Ravens roster in the final preseason game. It was against New Orleans. They went to New Orleans. And Michael Pierce had a dominant game. He made the roster as an undrafted guy. and obviously went on to have a successful keys back in Baltimore. But that's just an example of, it's not over till it's over. These guys still have an opportunity to make a name for themselves. Maybe they haven't had the strongest preseason, the strongest camp. It can be one play, one opportunity that can really turn something around. So I'm excited to see that. I'm excited to see the quarterback battle, how it goes between Josh Johnson and Anthony Brown. Seems like they're jockeying for a quarterback 3 spot. I think Josh Johnson's ahead right now. I'm also excited to see some of these younger guys like a Jeremy Lucien, who's had some corner safety versatility. Is he a practice squad player? Is he going to push his way onto the roster? There are the inside linebackers, Delshon Phillips and Kristen Welch, and some of the younger rookies too. Like Trenton Simpson didn't have a great game against the Commanders, but now's an opportunity for him to come back, which I think is really nice for these.
May I even jump in on that for him? Like, and maybe I'm seeing it wrong, but I haven't really felt like he showed himself like, wow, this training camp period. Like, am I missing that or something? Like I'm like watching and I'm like, I don't know. I'm like thinking, okay, you went from sheesh to nothing, like, I don't know.
Well, he missed some time with, I forget what the injury was, but I know he missed it. And the Commanders game was his first preseason action. But my thing with Trenton Simpson is it actually relates to what happened yesterday. Is the Cardinals just traded Isaiah Simmons, who was like 8th overall. He was a pick for them a couple years ago, and he came into the league as almost like a Trenton Simpson out of Clemson, a super versatile player that could play everywhere. You could play him at safety, you could play him in the slot, you could play him on the D line, inside linebacker, and the Cardinals moved him around so much. And Jadeveon Clowney for them is the same way. They moved them around so much where I don't think they ever really got to get comfortable, and it kind of made it so that they were working every single year at a different position, trying to learn new things. And I think that actually stunted their development. So for me, I don't want to see the Ravens do that with Trenton Simpson because he's the same guy. We saw him play in the slot. We saw him play as an inside linebacker. I'm not expecting Trenton Simpson to play a massive role for them this year, especially after the Clowney edition. I know there were some conversations about him maybe playing some rush linebacker and or maybe some Sam. But for me, because it's the same thing almost like Brandon Stevens. I know we've talked about this Q where the Ravens have put him at corner, put him at safety, put him at corner, put him at safety. And the whole thing is I just don't think he hasn't had the opportunity to be comfortable. So with Simpson, the athleticism is there, but coming out of college, I never thought he was a ready day one guy. Simmons was more of that because he was a high draft pick. He was one of the most versatile players in all of college football. But I just don't want to see the Ravens make that. I mean, I could call it a mistake. I don't want to see the Ravens make that mistake with Trenton Simpson and kind of stunt. I think it's fine for him to be behind Roquan and Patrick Queen for a year. We'll see what happens to Patrick Queen. And then after a year of learning, maybe he can step in because they had the exact same thing happen to him with the Patrick Owasso, Kenny Young thing. They trusted 2 young linebackers. It did not work. They had to bring in LJ Fort and Josh Bynes. They essentially thrust guys into roles they weren't ready for, and it didn't work for them. So I hope that the Ravens don't do that with Trenton Simpson. That's just my thought on the whole thing.
Yeah, no, it all makes sense. And I think part of, the growth process is learning, being out there, not getting injured, but learning under, the intensity of the fire. And I guess I just, maybe I'm getting caught up in the prisoner of the moment. We're going to talk about this next offseason when all the pundits be all up in the draft. Oh, my God, this guy and all that. And this is going to happen. And I'm going to just be like, all right, Trenton Simpson.
Well,
you and I know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, yeah, Q, they got to develop. And that's where, like, for me, I guess I just thought, like, ooh, wow, everybody's hyping them. And then I'm like watching them in practice and stuff. I'm like, all right, yeah. And yeah, like the touchdown, the Commanders running back, like, my God, Trent Simpson had him dead to rights. Like, if you're supposed to be all that, you tackling that dude. He ain't backing up into the end zone and making it spectacular. You helped a Commanders running back make the roster. Bruh, like, he should be calling you up and be like, yo, man, good looking out on missing that tackle. I feel really good about myself.
The whole thing with, and look, I hear what you're saying. I was going to say, I hear what you're saying. For me, I think that in terms of rookie production for this Ravens draft class, I think Zay Flowers is going to make up almost all of it. I think a lot of the players that the Ravens drafted outside of Zay Flowers are developmental pieces like a Trenton Simpson, like a Caillou Kelly, Tavius Robinson. Voorhees obviously isn't going to play this year. And then Sala is a guy too. They're mostly developmental guys. Maybe there's a play made here or there, but I think Zay is going to take all the rookie production. He's going to take it for himself. He's not going to let anybody else have it. He's going to be this crazy play. Saw Zay again. He's done everything and more. I don't think we should see him in the final preseason game. We'll see what they do against Tampa, but hopefully we don't see Lamar. I know John Harbaugh said Lamar wants to play, and if that was me, I'd say, Lamar, we're not going to do that. We're gonna rest because they've seen it happen with JK. So I'm not putting that out there. But Q, I appreciate you hopping on. That's all I have for you here today. When we get back next week, we're going to be talking roster cuts. We'll know who the Ravens' final 53 man is. We'll try to get an idea of their practice squad, but it's again, milestones. Preseason is over after Saturday, and then we're one step closer to the regular season.
One step closer, and I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be great. I think that's what, this all culminates into is let's get it on regular season.
Yeah, it's exciting. So we will be back next week here on Locked On Ravens. Q, I appreciate you again, and I appreciate everybody listening and watching for tuning in today on Locked On Ravens. We'll be back here on Monday with more Ravens content, so be sure to stay tuned for that. I'll see you right back here on Monday on Locked On Ravens.